My wife secretly called her first love and said that if she could do it all over again, she would choose him. When I confronted her, she panicked. Why are you making such a big deal out of something so small? Without hesitation, I asked for a divorce. She was stunned, because every time she got angry before, I was the one who coaxed her, but now, I don't do that anymore. Alice stared at me, expressionless. Behind her, our daughter, Daisy, peeked out cautiously, her gaze cold, distant, like I was nothing more than an unwelcome outsider. Do you care, Daisy, anymore? Alice asked me after a long time. She knew. She knew better than anyone that Daisy was my whole world, the one thing I cherished above all else, but whether it was Alice or Daisy, I had always been the one holding on, the one giving without hesitation. Even love, when given unreciprocated for too long, eventually runs dry. You don't have to worry, I said, my voice calm. I won't fight for custody. I'll transfer child support into an account and have someone bring it to you. This house, it's yours. Yours and Daisy's from now on. We have nothing to do with each other. I'll leave, I'll disappear from your lives. It was strange. I was heartbroken, yet when I spoke, my voice remained steady. Alice looked at me in disbelief. Alex, what's gotten into you? She asked, shaking her head. You're acting like this over nothing. I exhaled slowly. Think whatever you want. Just sign the divorce papers. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then, as if something had just clicked in her mind, she suddenly asked, is this because of Henry? I didn't respond. Just because I answered Henry's call yesterday? Her brows furrowed. Her eyes filled with shock. Even now, she still didn't understand. This wasn't just about a phone call. Yesterday had been rare, a holiday, a day off. I had cooked a full meal, my best dishes, even with the AC on. The summer heat and the effort of cooking left me drenched in sweat. After setting the table, I went to the bedroom to call them for dinner, only to overhear Alice on the phone with Henry. Her first love. They had been together for years, from their school days through college. They had been inseparable until the future tore them apart. Alice wanted to stay, to build a stable life in the city she knew. Henry wanted more. He wanted to leave, to chase bigger dreams in another city, promising to return once he had made enough money. Alice refused to do long distance. They fought, over and over again. In the end, Henry had given up. He was the one who finally called it quits. Fine. If we're breaking up, so be it. I'll have plenty of people who want me. That was the last thing Alice had ever said to him. Henry left. The next year, I met Alice. We fell fast, deep, and all-consuming. Not long after, she was the one who brought up marriage. By our second year together, we had Daisy, my one and only daughter. Even back then, when she asked me to marry her, it had felt surreal. I had asked, do you love me? She hadn't answered. Instead, she had countered, why? Do you not want to marry me? The wind had lifted her hair, veiling her eyes. I had no way of knowing what she had been feeling in that moment, but I knew what I had felt. My heart had pounded with exhilaration, overflowing with hope. I had said, I love you. Alice rarely talked about her past. Everything I knew about it, I had learned from her mother, Mrs. Smith. So when I heard the name Henry again, I almost forgot who he was. Henry, you don't have to apologize. We both made mistakes back then. I know. I never blamed you. Thank you for taking Daisy and me to the aquarium yesterday. She said she really likes you. If I had another chance, maybe I would have chosen you. My hand, raised to knock, froze midair. I stood there as if turned to stone, unable to move. Unable to breathe. Alice ended the call. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she faltered for a split second. I lowered my hand and forced an awkward smile. Dinner's ready. I'll go get Daisy. I turned and walked toward Daisy's room, my fingers reaching for the doorknob when Alice called out to me, Alex. I didn't turn around. About what you just heard. What did you say just now? I asked first. She fell silent for a moment. Then, finally, she said, nothing. Okay. I didn't press further and went inside to call Daisy for dinner. At the table, everyone was lost in their own thoughts. Alice's words echoed in my mind, stuck in my throat like a bone I couldn't swallow. When she reached over to put food on my plate, I didn't even notice. Alex. Alex? She raised her voice slightly. I snapped out of it and looked at her. What? Eat more. She placed another piece of braised pork ribs on my plate. What are you thinking about? Nothing. The ribs were tender, cooked to perfection, yet as I chewed, they tasted like nothing. That night, as I tucked Daisy into bed, she held up her picture book and pointed to an illustration. Daddy. Why did the prince look for Cinderella? Because he loved her, I answered. Just like, Daddy loves Mommy. For some reason, the words felt hollow the moment I said them. Does Cinderella love the prince? Daisy blinked. She does. Will they be happy together? Yes. Daisy scratched her head. Then, Daddy, let Mommy be with Uncle Henry. She grinned and leaned in to whisper in my ear, I just want Mommy to be happy. So, Daddy, can I have a new dad? memories crashed down on me like a wave. Looking at Alice now, I wanted nothing more than to end this ridiculous marriage as soon as possible. That I swallowed my emotions and pushed the divorce papers toward her. I'm tired, Alice. Just sign them. She snatched the papers, and without a moment's hesitation, scribbled down her name, Alex. Remember, you were the one who asked for this. She glared at me, eyes filled with anger. That I met her gaze and replied with nothing but a quiet, indifferent, let's part on good terms. That was the last thing I said before I packed my things and walked out. As I reached the door, Daisy grabbed my hand. Daddy, don't go. For a brief moment, I hesitated, but then she added, Daddy, you made Mommy mad. Aren't you going to make it up to her? I pulled my hand away. Don't call me Daddy anymore. Disappointment numbs a person. It turns them cold. Leaving behind the home I had once cherished, I checked into a random hotel for the night. The next morning, after finalizing the divorce, I bought a plane ticket out of San Francisco with nothing but a suitcase and the weight of everything I had lost. I boarded a midnight flight, vanishing from their lives without a trace. A week later, I had settled into my new life, with some connections to rely on. I found a decent job and was getting by just fine. That evening, I returned to my new apartment, poured myself a drink, and sat at the bar, letting the alcohol warm my chest under the soft glow of the moonlight. My thoughts drifted back to Alice. People don't change overnight. Looking back, all the ridiculous things she had done had left clues along the way. I remembered our wedding night. When I reached for her, she turned away and said she wasn't in the mood. I assumed she was just shy and didn't push her. Later, when I brought it up again, hoping for intimacy, she snapped at me out of nowhere. Is that all you ever think about? Alex, if that /s the kind of man you are, I find it disgusting. Honestly, marrying you might have been a mistake. I had stared at her, stunned that I didn't understand women. To me, being intimate with my wife was a way to express my love for her. I had no idea that wanting my own wife would become something she despised. That was the first time I wondered, was it because of Henry? I tested the waters, asking cautiously, do you still love him? She hesitated for 2 seconds before saying, what does Henry have to do with this? Stop blaming your own issues on someone else. That conversation had never left my mind. At one point, I even considered, if she doesn't love me, why should I hold on? And I was ready to let go. But the night I planned to have that conversation, Alice came to me first. She was drunk, her body reeking of alcohol, her eyes hazy and unfocused. Do you love me? She kept asking, over and over. There was nowhere to hide. I sighed and said, I love you. She climbed onto my lap, lifting her skirt as she straddled me. For the first time, she was the one taking the initiative. I had no idea why she had been drinking that night. She didn't seem happy, but the moment she moaned Henry's name under me, I understood everything. She was passionate, yet I felt nothing. She begged me, over and over, to tell her I loved her, but it didn't matter to her whether I did or not. The next morning, she was back to her usual self. As she got dressed, she glanced at me, her tone indifferent. Aren't you getting up? Don't you have work? Snapping out of my daze, I hurried to get dressed. For some reason, I felt nervous, so much so that I fumbled clumsily with my tie. Alice rolled her eyes, snatched the tie from my hands, and expertly fastened it for me. You can't even do something this simple. Something about that moment made me happy. I tugged on the tie slightly, pulling her into my arms. I kissed her lips and smiled. She didn't blush like I had imagined. Instead, she patted my shoulder matter-of-factly. Don't do that again. A few weeks passed after that night, and Alice started showing signs of nausea and vomiting. I took her to the hospital, and sure enough, she was pregnant. I had never felt this kind of joy before. I immediately requested time off from work, took 2 days of leave, bought all sorts of prenatal supplements, and even made a special nourishing soup just for her. That night, I prepared a lavish meal, completely unaware that Alice was sitting at the table, absent-mindedly stroking her stomach, lost in thought. As I set the last dish on the table, she spoke in a flat tone, Alex, I'm not keeping this baby. The words stunned me. I just stared at her, speechless. I had no idea how long I stood there before I finally forced out, what did you just say? It's funny how, when people refuse to accept reality, they instinctively repeat the question, maybe to buy themselves time, maybe to convince themselves they misheard. Alice repeated, her voice devoid of emotion. I said, I'm not keeping this baby. Why? My voice rose involuntarily. She lifted her gaze slightly. It's just, not the right time. Not the right time? My frustration boiled over. What does that even mean? If you're worried about my job and how you'll manage, I can hire a live-in nanny. If you think it'll affect your career, we can figure something out. Hell, even if you told me you just hate pregnancy, you're scared, you don't want to go through the pain, I could accept that. But not the right time? What the hell does that even mean? Alice said nothing. I felt completely drained. I slammed my palm against the table, the sound cutting through the tense silence. Turning my back to her, I exhaled sharply, trying to hold myself together. Alice, do you always have to do this? My voice was quieter now, but no less bitter. Do you have to give me a piece of candy before slapping me in the face? Do you think it's fun to play with me like this? She remained silent, her indifference only fueling the exhaustion inside me. In the end, she relented. I'll think about it. She didn't go through with the abortion, but I never dared to ask why, because the day she decided to keep the baby was the day after she ran into Henry and his new girlfriend. I was deep in my drink when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Alice. I hesitated before answering, her voice was weak, trembling. Alex, my stomach hurts again. Can you pick up some painkillers on your way home? I paused for a moment before saying, you forgot we're divorced. There was silence on the other end. Then, softly, she said, I see. She hung up, but within seconds, my phone rang again, annoyed. I picked up. There should still be painkillers in the medicine cabinet. Check the living room. And don't call me again, I'll block your number. We're divorced. Let's not drag this out. Just as I finished speaking, a small, hesitant voice came through the phone. Daddy, why don't you care about Mommy anymore? I froze. Daisy, her voice quivered. Mommy is sick. She didn't go to work today, and you're not home either. I called Uncle Henry with Mommy's phone, hoping he could come take care of us, but Uncle Henry said he was busy. He's not coming, she sniffled, her words turning into sobs. Daddy, do you really not want Mommy and me anymore? Didn't you say we were the most important to you? If you're not here, what will we do? It would be a lie to say my heart didn't ache, but the same girl who had asked for a different father, who had chosen someone else when things were easy, was now calling me when that someone let her down. She didn't deserve my sympathy. I forced my voice to remain calm. I have my own life now. Daisy, you should remember, I told you when I left that I'm not your dad anymore. But, Daddy, is there anything else? I cut her off. There was a brief silence. Then, quietly, she murmured, no, nothing, okay. Then I'm hanging up. As soon as the call ended, I blocked Alice's number. In the bedroom, Alice curled up in pain, sweat beading on her forehead. Mommy, are you okay? Does it still hurt? Daisy patted her back clumsily, trying to comfort her. Alice forced a weak smile and shook her head. Daisy, can you bring Mommy the medicine box? I need to take something for the pain, okay? Daisy nodded eagerly and ran off to fetch it. Alice leaned against the headboard, eyes closed. As my words from earlier replayed in her mind. If this had been before, back then, if she told me she was in pain, I would have rushed home without hesitation. I would have taken care of everything for her, held her in my arms, and distracted her with my rambling. But now, all of that was nothing more than a distant luxury. Alice used to think that if she had to pick one thing she could never lose in this lifetime, my name would have been her answer. I wasn't particularly handsome, but I was dependable, hardworking, and always put her first. Even though our marriage hadn't started with love, all she had to do was say a few sweet words, and I would have given her everything, without complaint, without question. But that illusion was gone now. Mommy, take your medicine, Daisy said as she placed the medicine box beside Alice, thoughtfully handing her a glass of water as well. Thank you, Daisy. Alice struggled to sit up, took her pills, and lay back down. Mommy, I'm sorry, Daisy whispered, looking guilty. I couldn't get Daddy to come back. It's okay. Alice stroked her daughter's head gently. It's not that Daddy doesn't want us, it's us who don't want him anymore. Even if he wanted to come back, Mommy wouldn't let him. So, don't worry, okay? It's not your fault. Daisy lowered her head even further. But, I couldn't get Uncle Henry to come either. Alice froze for a second before forcing a bitter smile. Uncle Henry must have had something urgent come up. He didn't mean to ignore you, Mommy. Daisy *s tears suddenly spilled over. What did I do wrong? Why won't Uncle Henry come? Why won't Daddy come either? Why? Alice's eyes grew red, and she pulled Daisy into her arms, gently patting her back to soothe her. They stayed like that for a long, long time. Eventually, Alice let out a barely audible sigh and murmured to herself, it's not Daisy's fault. It's Mommy's, it's Daddy's, it was never yours. Alice drifted into a deep sleep. By the time she woke up, the room was dark. She reached up to rub her aching forehead, her mind groggy. Alex, I don't feel well. Can you run the bath for Daisy? There was no answer. A moment later, Daisy walked into the room, clutching her stuffed toy. Mommy. You forgot. Daddy's gone. Silence settled over the room. Alice smiled. Oh, yes. Mom was confused in her sleep. She stared up at the dark ceiling, her expression empty, her body feeling weightless, like she was nothing more than a shell left behind. After a while, she whispered, Mommy made a mistake. Just one more minute, and you'll get up and run your bath. Daisy looked at her mother carefully before leaning in to kiss Alice's forehead. Mommy, are you lonely? Don't be scared. Daisy is here. Lonely? Alice repeated, as if the word were foreign to her. Me? Why would I be? I don't know. Daisy said, shaking her head. Maybe because mommy misses daddy, Alice scoffed. That's impossible. Mommy doesn't miss daddy. You're wrong, really? Daisy looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Alice turned her head away, avoiding her daughter/s gaze. Mommy doesn't miss daddy. Not now. Not ever. The next morning was a rare one. Alice slept in, the curtains weren't fully drawn, leaving a sliver of space where the morning sun crept through. The light landed on the empty pillow beside her. Alice reached out. Her fingers brushing against it.cold.no warmth, she let out a quiet breath. How could I miss him? I never even loved him. In the empty room, she was the only one left to hear her own lies. 6 months after leaving San Francisco, I had fully adjusted to life in Los Angeles. It was peaceful. It was good. Most importantly, no one disturbed me. Since blocking Alice's number half a year ago, I hadn't received a single call from her or Daisy. Then, about a month ago, I switched phones and got a new number. With that, I completely stepped into a new chapter of my life. 2 years later, I was transferred to a neighboring city for work. During a company dinner, I met Emily. As time passed, we grew closer, and eventually, we confessed our feelings for each other and started dating. A year into our relationship, we moved in together. The following year, we got married. A year after that, we had a son. Emily was nothing like Alice. She was thoughtful, caring, always attentive to my needs, she would often say. Even men crave love and care. So she would have a cold beer waiting for me when I got home from work. She would pick up my favorite snacks while running errands for our son. When I struggled at work, she never hesitated to praise my abilities and reassure me. Emily was the definition of a perfect wife and mother, and the more I compared, the more Alice seemed unbearable in hindsight. She had never truly cared about me. She never prepared a meal for me in advance, never paid attention to my preferences. Never noticed my emotions. I still remember one particular night when I worked late until 9 that I was starving when I got home, only to be greeted by leftovers, and not just any leftovers, scraps that I had specifically told Alice I'd be home for dinner and asked her to save me some food. She did, barely. 2 vegetable dishes with nothing but a few oily leaves left. A bowl of broth so thin and clear, I couldn't find a single piece of meat, and cold, stale rice. Disappointed, I asked, "What did you guys have for dinner?" "We bought some ready-made dishes. Daisy and I finished them. I stir-fried some veggies and left you some. There's also pork rib soup." Daisy's growing, so I gave her all the meat. "But there's still broth in the pot. Why are you asking all of a sudden?" I opened my mouth but didn't say anything. It wasn't about the food. It wasn't about money. It was about the fact that she could have saved me a proper meal, but she didn't. I simply didn't matter to them, not even to Daisy, the daughter I had cherished, spoiled, and adored from the moment she was born. "Eat faster, Dad," she urged impatiently. "I still have homework questions for you. If you take too long, you'll have to stay up late, and you'll be exhausted. Why don't you ask your mom?" I asked. Mom said she's already busy enough taking care of me and cooking. She told me not to bother her. Sure, taking care of a child is exhausting, but wasn't I busy too? Wasn't I the child's father? Wasn't she the child's mother? And Daisy, I had thought I was a good father. I had showered her with love, spoiled her. Always put her first. She had been different from other kids. When she first learned to speak, her first word wasn't mommy, but daddy, and yet, as she grew older, she and Alice seemed to become allies, pushing me into the role of a servant in my own home. In that suffocating house, I was always the one being ordered around, being used, being expected to serve. But then Emily came along. She filled the void Alice had left. And now, our son, Luca, was about to turn 1. I had a wonderful wife. A beautiful family. My life was happy, simple, and whole. Day after day, I woke up content, knowing that this time, I was truly loved. I thought my life would continue peacefully like this, unbothered and content. But 2 years later, on an otherwise unremarkable weekend, I saw Alice again. I had been in my study, busy editing a document, when the doorbell rang. Emily went to answer it. As the door slowly swung open, Alice and Daisy stood on the other side. Both women froze. Before Emily could say anything, Alice quickly said, "Sorry, I think I might have knocked on the wrong door." From inside the study, I gathered my papers and called out, "Emily, who is it? Is it Marcus?" Emily didn't respond. I stepped out and locked eyes with Alice. She stiffened. Emily hesitated, unsure how to explain the awkward situation, but Alice didn't wait. She pushed past Emily and walked straight up to me, disbelief written all over her face. "You're married, after all these years?" The first thing she said to me was a cold, emotionless question. Emily glanced at me. I understood what she was thinking. There had been a night, long ago, when I had told Emily everything about Alice. We had talked for hours. I laid bare all my longing, my hopes, and the deep disappointment that had buried them. Emily had simply patted my back in response. Even though she had never seen Alice before, I could tell, just by her expression, that she knew exactly who the uninvited guest at our door was. Alice cast Emily a condescending look before putting on a fake smile. "Oh, you probably don't know who I am, do you? Let me introduce myself. I'm Alice. And this is my daughter, Daisy. That's right, Daisy is Alex's child. I'm his ex-wife. Nice to meet you, Emily replied. Her voice neutral. Alice feigned an apologetic look. Sorry you had to find out about Alex's past marriage like this. We started dating right after college. He loved me very much. We divorced because of a misunderstanding. Then, she tilted her chin up slightly, as if claiming some sort of unshaken authority. He probably never mentioned me, did he? That's just the kind of person Alex is. The more something matters to him, the less he talks about it, because he's afraid that if he does, he'll just get hurt all over again. Emily simply responded. I know about you. Alex told me. Alice's face instantly darkened. I stepped between her and Emily, my voice sharp. How did you find me? Alice turned her gaze back to me. After all these years, that's the first thing you have to say to me? Alice glanced at Emily, then tugged at Daisy /S clothes. Daisy looked up at me and said, we haven't /T seen each other for several years. Dad, you must have missed me a lot, right? Daisy looks more and more like Alice. She had grown to look even more like Alice, the slight tilt of her eyes. The way she carried herself, it all felt like a subtle challenge, as if she was proving to me that she and her mother had been perfectly fine without me. Daisy was my first child. Of course, I was relieved to see her healthy and well, but as I met her gaze, that self-satisfied expression made me uncomfortable. She hadn't /T always been like this. I remembered when she was just a newborn, so tiny in my arms that I was terrified of holding her too tightly. I had watched her grow. Day by day. From breastfeeding to weaning. From being pushed in a stroller to stumbling through her first steps, not a single day went by when I didn't worry about her. When she first learned to speak, she would run to the door every time I came home from work, her little arms stretched out, calling for me to pick her up. When she got a little older, she would drag my heavy briefcase to the door every morning and wave me off like she had seen in TV shows. Be careful on the road, Daddy. She would say seriously, and every night, after a long, tiring day, she would stand by the door, waiting to greet me with a bright smile. Welcome home, Daddy. At dinner, she would wave her chubby little hands and say, Daddy works so hard. When I grow up, I'm going to make lots of money and take care of Mommy and Daddy. But at some point, that all changed. Little by little, Daisy stopped clinging to me. She no longer saw me off at the door, telling me to be careful on my way to work. And, of course, she no longer greeted me when I came home. At first, I thought she was just growing up, becoming more reserved, expressing love in a subtler way. But one night, after an exhausting day at work, I came home late, only to find that Daisy was still awake. Alice was on her phone, seemingly chatting with someone. Daisy sat on the floor, hugging her stuffed toy, playing house by herself. Why are you still up? It's almost 11, I said as I walked in. Alice quickly locked her phone and said, we couldn't sleep. We were waiting for you. Oh. They were waiting for me. The warmth of that thought filled my chest, and I smiled as I crouched beside Daisy. Were you waiting for Daddy? She ignored me. I cleared my throat. Trying again. Daddy had a long day at work. Daisy, can you help me massage my shoulders? Daisy glanced at me and said in her small, innocent voice, who isn't tired? I blinked, caught off guard. What? Daisy's big eyes blinked back at me, pure and guileless. Mommy takes care of me all day. She's tired too. It's not just Daddy who gets tired. But Mommy never complains. Only Daddy does, even though he doesn't do much. Daddy is always pretending. Daisy doesn't like a daddy like that. I froze. Who taught you to say that? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Daisy flinched. Her eyes instantly welling with tears, she glanced at Alice. Alice sighed in irritation and pulled Daisy into her arms. She's just a kid talking nonsense. Why are you taking it so seriously? You're a grown man. Have some self-awareness. That was the first time I ever argued with Alice. I had never denied the hard work she put in as a mother, but at the same time, my role as the provider, the foundation that kept our family afloat, shouldn't have been dismissed so easily, and the people dismissing it were the two I loved most. Why would you teach Daisy to say things like that? I demanded. Baffled. Everyone contributes to this family. No one has it easier than the other. What exactly are you trying to make her believe? She's still a child. Why are you filling her head with this nonsense? What are you yelling about? What did I say that was wrong? Alice's voice was cold as she looked down at me with disdain. You're mad about work, so now you're taking it out on me and Daisy? If you don't want to be here, just say it. Stop beating around the bush. What a joke. With that, she carried Daisy out of the room and slammed the door behind her, taking her to sleep in the guest bedroom. After that, we fell into a long, cold war. Daisy, however, only made things worse. During dinner one evening, she looked at me with big, expectant eyes and said, Daddy, you should make up with Mommy. She's so upset she can't even eat. If she's not hungry, then she doesn't have to eat, I said, setting my chopsticks down on the table. Daisy pouted. Daddy, you're so mean, I won't eat either. I'll go keep mommy company. And just like that, she left the table, choosing her over me without hesitation. That a child I had once cherished with all my heart. Yet she felt no love for me. If I told anyone, they'd probably laugh at the irony, but it didn't matter anymore. Daisy was nothing more than an obligation to me now. My only responsibility was to send her living expenses on time. Once she turned 18, I would have no ties to her at all. That I had no intention of pouring love into a daughter who had no love for me. Besides, I had a wife now. A son. There was no longer any space in my heart for Daisy or Alice. Daisy, I have a new family now, I said evenly. You and your mom showing up like this, it's disruptive. Why? Daisy pouted. That woman isn't as pretty as mommy, and she's not as capable either. And didn't you say you loved me and mommy the most? I crouched down so I was at her eye level. But Daisy, you and mommy didn't love me the most either, did you? Daisy frowned but didn't respond. You need to be reasonable, I continued. You're older now, and you should understand. Your mom and I never had real love between us. But I love my wife now. I love my son. I know this might sound harsh, but I think you and your mom have been doing just fine without me. Be good, okay? Go home with your mom. That I don't want to, Daisy snapped, shoving me away. You lying. You do love me and mommy. You just won't admit it because you're afraid of losing to Uncle Henry, right? My face darkened. That I had tried to reason with her, but she refused to listen. Every time she brought up Henry, I knew nothing good would come out of her mouth. Back when she had asked if she could change her dad, I had spent the entire night unable to sleep. First, I had been disturbed by the fact that Daisy even knew about Henry. From the way she talked about him. It wasn't just a passing mention. She had met him, spent time with him. Had Alice been sneaking around with Henry while I was still around? Had she taken Daisy along with her while she cheated, right under my nose, and I had been completely oblivious? Second, I had been deeply hurt. Daisy had never once questioned Alice's faithfulness. Instead, she had compared me to Henry and decided he was the better father. But the reality was clear, wasn't it? If Henry had truly cared about them, if he had wanted to step in and be Daisy's real father, then why were they here looking for me instead of him? Wasn't the answer obvious? If I were to be brutally honest, the truth was simple. Henry didn't want a second-hand family, and Alice, afraid and desperate, had come want back. She had sent Daisy here to pull at my heartstrings, to make me leave my current life behind and return to San Francisco with them. That in the end, I was nothing but a backup plan. A safety net. Just as I was about to lash out, a loud wail erupted from the bassinet. My son had woken up, crying at the top of his lungs. It's time to feed him, Emily said, her voice slightly unsteady. I'll take him to the room. You talk things through with Miss Alice. Even though Emily was clearly upset, she remained composed, trusting me to handle the situation. That was the fundamental difference between her and Alice. I nodded, walked over, and wrapped my arms around her in reassurance. I'll take care of this. Emily turned toward the bassinet, but before she could reach it, Daisy suddenly rushed over, grabbed the edge of the crib, and gave it a violent shove. Shut up. You're so annoying. The bassinet rocked wildly. And my son's cries turned into frantic, terrified screams. You can't do that. Emily gasped, shoving Daisy aside as she scooped our son into her arms. Daisy huffed, completely unfazed. He's too loud. I was just warning him. What's the big deal? You're an adult, why are you making a fuss over a kid? And you pushed me. What if I fell and got hurt? Could you afford to pay for that? Alice, standing off to the side, watched smugly, not even attempting to scold Daisy. Instead, she chimed in with a lazy smirk. She's just playing around. No need to overreact. That was the last straw. I yanked Daisy toward me and, without hesitation, slapped her across both cheeks. Apologized to Emily. Now, Daisy stood frozen in shock. Her lips trembled as tears welled up in her eyes, but for the first time, she had nothing to say. Alice's face contorted with fury. She rushed forward, shielding Daisy. How dare you hit her? She's just a child. She's your daughter. Without a word, I struck Alice across the face just as hard. Look at what you've turned her into. I spat. She's ruined. Alice and Daisy were both stunned. Even Emily, standing beside me, seemed momentarily taken aback by my sheer rage. Alice lifted a trembling hand to touch the red mark blooming on her cheek. You hit me? She stammered that I should hit you. I was livid. I was furious. You first took Daisy to meet Henry in private, flirted with him on the phone, and brainwashed Daisy, making her take your cheating partner as her ideal father. You ignored the development of the child /S values, indulged her in doing bad things again and again, and taught her to be a complete waste. After I left, Henry didn't /T want to start a family with you, so you instigated Daisy to come to me, wanting to take me back and continue to exploit me. Now, you let Daisy hurt my child again, and now you're standing here, letting her hurt my child, and you still have the audacity to act like the victim? I grabbed Alice by the collar, forcing her to look me in the eyes. Alice, tell me, do you really think you don't deserve to be hit? Alice stood frozen for several seconds before finally snapping out of it. She yanked herself free, glaring at me. Even if I made mistakes, this is too much. Maybe I didn't raise Daisy well, but that's my problem. And as for Henry, I only met up with him a few times. Nothing happened. I don't understand why you're making such a big deal out of this. Then, just as suddenly, her eyes dulled, and she let out a quiet breath. That I just wanted to see you again, she murmured. Daisy and I came all this way, and this is how you treat us. Does your conscience not hurt at all? I let out a cold laugh. How pathetic. You really think you can just put on a sad face and it'll feel bad for you? Alice. Let me make this clear, there are things I will never compromise on. I turned to Daisy, gripping her by the shoulders. Listen carefully. I don't care what kind of games you and your mother have been playing, and I don't care about whatever history you have with Henry. But at the very least, you need to learn one thing: don't be a bad person. Your mother has spoiled you rotten, but you're old enough to know better. If you keep this up, life will teach you lessons far harsher than I ever could. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I shoved both Alice and Daisy toward the door. I've said everything I needed to say. I've been more than fair, now get out of my house. I shut the door firmly behind them. Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping up beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. Don't let this get to you. I exhaled, placing my hand over hers in reassurance. They're not worth it. She still looked concerned. But what now? Alice and your daughter came all this way to find you. If they keep showing up like this, what if they don't stop? I knew what she was thinking. If they've gone back to San Francisco, then good, I said. But if they're still hanging around in LA, it'll make it clear to them one last time. And if that doesn't work, they'll call the police. Wouldn't that be a bit? You don't need to worry about that, I cut in. Emily. They were the ones who crossed the line first. You don't have to tolerate them just because I once had a family with Alice. And I will not let them make you feel like you have to. I turned to her, voice firm. You and Luca are my family now. Only you and Luca. That's all that matters to me, and if anyone tries to disrupt our life, whoever they are, I'll do whatever it takes to shut them down. Meanwhile, Alice and Daisy wandered down the street, the weight of their rejection hanging over them. Mom, what do we do now? Daisy asked, glancing up at Alice. Dad doesn't want us anymore. Should we still try to get him back from that woman? Alice adjusted her disheveled collar and smiled faintly. Who said he doesn't want us anymore? Daisy frowned in confusion. What do you mean? Dad said all those awful things. He probably hates us now. There's no way he's coming back with us. Alice's eyes glinted. And why do you think he hates us? Daisy blinked, clearly lost. Because, we showed up at his house out of nowhere, and he felt harassed? Alice shook her head immediately. No. I've known your father for years. That's not why he was angry. Then why? He was angry about what I said to your Uncle Henry and the fact that you told your father that you wanted to change your father. Daisy's mouth parted slightly, but she said nothing. In other words, Alice continued smoothly, he's just throwing a tantrum. A tantrum, yes. Alice smirked. He spent years giving us everything, and in the end, he felt betrayed. That's why he's acting like this, why he divorced me, why he left us. Why he ran off to marry someone else and have another child. He's not really happy. He's just trying to convince himself that he is. Daisy tilted her head. I don't get it. Alice crouched down slightly, lowering her voice. Your dad thinks we don't love him. So he picked the first woman he could find, married her, and pretended to move on, but deep down? He's still empty. Daisy blinked. And what happens? Alice whispered, if we tell him we were wrong? That we miss him? That we need him? That we still love him? Daisy scratched her head. Then what? Alice chuckled. Do you really think he'd be able to turn away from the family he spent years with, just to stay with some woman he barely knows? She straightened, tossing her hair back with a smirk. Let's find out. The next day, my friend Carl gave me an update on Alice and Daisy's whereabouts. Carl clicked his tongue. Man, your ex-wife is relentless. She just won't let go. If she cared this much, where the hell was she back then? They just feel like they can get used to my life without me. I heard from a classmate last night that his friend /'s wife knew Alice. She also told me that Henry got back together with his ex not long ago. Alice has no one to rely on, so she thought of me. So, what's the plan? You're not just going to ignore this, are you? If they keep harassing you, it's going to be a pain in the ass. Of course not, I scoffed. Send me their address. I'll go talk to them myself, Carl frowned. You're going to them, yeah. Better than waiting for them to show up at my house again. If I go to them first, I can put an end to this on my terms. And if they pull any stunts, I'll call the cops. I'm not letting them disrupt my family again. Carl thought about it for a second, then nodded. Fair enough. Hold on, I'll send it to you. A few moments later, my phone buzzed with the location that I stared at the map, mentally preparing myself. After breakfast, I followed the pinned address and arrived at the place Alice and Daisy were staying. I knocked. Daisy opened the door. Dad? She blinked in surprise. Why are you here? Alice appeared behind her almost immediately. She looked startled at first, but then quickly masked it with a smile, stepping aside to invite me in. I was too impulsive yesterday, she said, offering me a cup of coffee. I'm sorry. But I really just wanted you to come back to Daisy and me. She took a slow breath, her voice softening. Alex, do you know how much I've missed you all these years? I rolled my eyes and set the cup down without taking a sip. Cut the crap. I'm not here to reminisce. Alice's smile stiffened. I want to know why the hell you two are still in LA, I said coldly. If you're just here for a trip, I don't care. But if you're planning on showing up at my house again, let me be very clear, I will make sure you regret it. Alice faltered for a moment, then forced out a small, bitter laugh. Do you have to be so harsh? She murmured. We mean no harm. I just wanted to reunite Daisy with her father, and find my way back to you. Is that really so wrong? You weren't like this when we were still married, I shot back. Now that I have a new family, you suddenly regret everything? Alice, are you bored? I pushed my chair back and stood up. I'll keep this simple. I want your word that you won't bother me or my family again. Alice frowned. You're not even leaving room for negotiation, are you? She studied me carefully, then scoffed. But tell me this, Alex, if you really hated me, if you really didn't care, why did you come all the way here? You can say whatever you want, but I don't believe you feel nothing for me. You can't just erase all these years we spent together. I dragged a hand down my face, already feeling exhausted. T you understand? But Alice wasn't done. She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. Alex, let's go back to how things were. Please. Life without you has been unbearable for me and for Daisy. I know I was wrong before, but I get it now. The person I love has always been you, Daisy, and I need you. I need you. I've barely been able to sleep, because every time I close my eyes, all I see is you. And after seeing you yesterday, I can't go back to living without you. Give me a chance, Alex. I'll do better. I'll be the wife you deserve. I'll make you happy. As she spoke, she nudged Daisy lightly, right on cue. Daisy's eyes welled up with tears. Daddy, she sniffled. I miss you too. You used to love me the most, remember? You wouldn't want me to be sad, right? Please, Daddy, come back. I promise I'll be good. I'll be your little girl again. I let out a slow breath. You'll love me and only me, huh? I repeated, tilting my head. Alice's eyes flickered with something close to triumph. Yes, she nodded eagerly. Only you. Just you. I reached for her hand, the one gripping my arm. Alice and Daisy exchanged a quick glance, their expressions shifting ever so slightly. They thought they had me. Alice's fingers twitched, preparing to hold mine, probably imagining that I was about to reciprocate. Instead, I peeled her fingers off me one by one. Then, I smoothed out the wrinkles on my sleeve, scoffed, and sneered. What makes you think your love is worth anything to me? Alice_S face twisted with shock. Mom, this ISN_T what you said would happen, Daisy muttered, clearly confused. Alice panicked. No, this isn't right. You're joking, aren't you, Alex? She forced a smile, grabbing onto my arm. Did you not hear me properly? Let me say it again. Daisy and I have always loved you. We were just bad at showing it, that's all. But that won't happen anymore. I'll be the one to run toward you now. Only you. I'll never leave again. Her voice grew more desperate with each word, but I was done listening. I cut her off coldly. Did I not make myself clear? Or do you really think I'm that much of an idiot? I took a step forward, lowering my voice. If you insist on humiliating yourself, then let me spell it out for you. I don't want you. You're trash to me. Do you understand now? Stop wasting my time. Whether you really love me or not is none of my concern. The only thing I care about is making sure you stay the hell away from me and my family. If you show up again, I will call the police. Alice shook her head wildly, refusing to accept it. No, this isn't right. She grabbed at my sleeve again, her voice trembling. Look at me, Alex. I'm Alice. Not Emily. You're confused. I know you want to leave her, you just don't know how to say it. right? I ripped her hand off me and glared. Don't make me say something even uglier in front of the kid. Alice's confidence shattered in an instant. She stood frozen, completely lost. Daisy tugged at her arm, voice hesitant. Mom, what do we do now? Dad doesn't want us, but you said he would. Alice said nothing. She took a shaky breath, then latched onto one last excuse. Daisy needs her father, she said, eyes pleading. Do you really want her to grow up without one? Do you know how cruel people can be to kids without dads? Alex, even if you don't care about me, think about her. Let's get back together. For her sake, Alice used to scoff at playing the victim, but now, it was all she had left. Pathetic. Carl was right. If she wanted me so badly, where the hell was this devotion when it actually mattered? I would never accept a reconciliation built on betrayal. This wasn't guilt. It was strategy. I sneered. Alice, you're disgusting. Her eyes widened, and she stumbled back a step. Mom, say something, Daisy whimpered, tugging at her sleeve. Maybe it was Daisy's whining, or maybe it was the sheer panic of losing control. But Alice snapped. She suddenly grabbed Daisy by the arm and shoved her toward me. Look at her. She screamed. She's your daughter. Your first child. Are you really just going to abandon her like this? Daisy flinched, her lips trembling. Mom, Alice ignored her. She dug her nails into Daisy's arm, pinching the soft flesh hard enough to turn it red. Cry, she hissed. Cry for your dad. Let him see how much you need him. Mom, stop, Daisy whimpered, trying to squirm away. It hurts, but Alice wouldn't let go. Tears spilled from Daisy's eyes as Alice twisted the skin harder. Cry louder. That was it. I ripped Daisy from Alice's grasp and shoved her behind me. What the hell is wrong with you? I roared. Alice blinked as if snapping out of a trance. Her gaze flickered to Daisy cowering behind me, clutching her bruised arm, eyes filled with fear, and then, she broke. Alice crumpled to the floor, burying her face in her hands as gut-wrenching sobs tore through her. I bought Daisy an ice pop to soothe the pain. She sniffled as she peeled off the wrapper, but when she glanced at Alice still sobbing on the ground, she hesitated, unable to take a bite. Mom, she whispered. I let out a heavy sigh. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The police arrived quickly. I gave a full report detailing Alice's physical abuse toward Daisy and mentioning her repeated harassment at my home. The officers assured me they would handle it and that both Daisy and I would get the proper protection we needed. After filing my statement, I left. However, whether it was Alice or Daisy, I was giving my all. You are back. We've been waiting for you. Emily came over with a smile and took off my coat. I kissed her forehead. Yes, am back. After that day, Alice never came again, and I never heard of her whereabouts, and my life became happier. Just yesterday, my son called me dad. I hugged Emily and was excited for a long time. I looked at the family photo on the wall and snuggled with Emily. Emily, I love you. Emily gently held my face and said solemnly, I love you too. I will always love you.